Welcome, Mike.
Hey, thanks a lot, Tony.
And thanks for welcoming us here. This is Digital Cafe. This is the place you started in 1991, right?
The original, yeah, actually that was the original company. I sold it in '99 and got the mark back and built the studio kind of as a, you know, it's a beautiful history and a piece of my past and something I'm very proud of.
Well, let's talk a little bit about how you got started, because you're different than most of the other people kind of within our family that we've met, all the top guys that work together. You're the guy that a lot of the guys, you're the go-to guys when they're figuring out the technology side besides the marketing.
Right.
And some people might say, well, I'm not a tech guy, I can't relate to him, he has that. But I think, you know, you're an unlikely person to be this. You grew up in a town with, what, 750 people in Minnesota, is that right?
Yep, South Central Minnesota, Eagle Lake. My dad's a barber, oldest of 4 kids, so you know, very limited resources, no mentors to speak of. So yeah, I mean, I came from nowhere. I'm a classic. If I can do it, you can do it too.
Now, you taught yourself to program at 14 years old. Again, nobody in your family is even slightly tech-oriented. Weren't they almost against technology?
My parents were thought it was a waste of time. To this day, my dad still apologizes every time it comes up. And my youngest brother, I actually taught him to code when he was probably in 4th grade. And he's gone on, now he works for an advertising agency, and he was one of my greatest employees for many years. So he's still back in Minnesota.
Wow.
But my sister and my brother just weren't interested in technology like I was. But yeah, I always loved building and making things and taking things apart. But I had to learn it myself, and I actually had to sneak technology into the house to use it. So I was bartering with whatever I had, making whatever money I had, and I actually had computers in the house, and my parents didn't know about it.
Oh my God.
So, but I taught myself the basics, and then I had a neighbor who really recognized my enthusiasm for technology, and he paid me to babysit his Apple II one Christmas vacation. He was out of town. My parents let me have it, and I literally didn't go to sleep for a week.
Wow.
And I taught myself how to write games. Wow. And then from there, it kind of turned into, someone heard that Mike liked computers, so it was, and my dad started talking about it a little bit. And some insurance salesman said, hey, can you help me with blah, blah, blah. It was a database project. And I said, sure, you know, and I'd make a commitment that I had.
How old would you be at that point?
I was like 16, 17 when I started doing some consulting. And then, you know, I have a high school education, but I don't learn in a traditional, traditional environment. I don't have a school mind. Yeah. And I would say I was not only fiercely independent, but angry, you know, so any form of authority didn't work. You know, it's just, my brain isn't tuned to listen to authority, I would say. That's sort of a...
break the rules.
Yeah. So anyway, I learned these things, and other people found them useful. And so I realized that was a huge conditioning moment for me, is just like, build a series of useful skills that people need and desire. And from there, opportunities started coming my way. And again, I didn't have the resources to recognize what I was good at, and I didn't have anyone cultivating me. So I had to really, it was sort of like I was a blind man, you know.
Trial and error.
Yeah, absolutely. But by the time I was about 19, I took a job at a company in Mankato, which is nearby Eagle Lake, and I wrote vehicle simulation software. And so it was for, you know, General Motors and that kind of thing. So I got to travel for the first time. It was the first time I was on a jet. I was 19 years old, and you know, I'm just, you know, a poor kid from Minnesota, basically.
Wow.
But anyway, from there, I started programming for the first Macintosh when the first one came out. And I know you're a Mac freak,
yes.
So.
In fact, my first book on that, I kind of kept putting those little blue discs in and out 7 times to say something.
Oh, yeah, I remember those days. It's so miserable.
And then that little bomb that would come up.
Yep. But
you lose everything.
But there was something about that little box that was hypnotic. It was so seductive and sexy. It was incredible. And
we're still Apple guys today.
Totally, yeah. And I mean, I've been on the dark side forever, you know, and then I came back. I followed the money, I mean, honestly. But what wound up happening is I taught myself how to write games for the Mac. And I met, I knew a lot of people in the video game piracy world, I will say, you know, back in those days, because again, I had no resources, but I knew a lot of these guys, and one of them was friends with a game developer. And I met him, and we immediately were like brothers. I mean, and I met his wife, who ran this little company, and I said, I want to write video games for the Macintosh, and they said, prove it. So I went home. I stayed up for about a month. I wrote some demos. I showed it to him, and I took a pay cut. I mean, I was making like maybe $16,500 a year. I mean, I was living on nothing, and I drove from Mankato to Minneapolis 3 days a week. I stayed in what became my business partner's basement, basically. You know, part-time. I was married. You know, it was like, you know, I was doing everything I could to just live the dream. Right. But I was just passionate and enthusiastic, and wrote some games there. Eventually they sold that business, and shortly after started Digital Cafe, and that's really when the magic started to happen, because we were one of the very first interactive marketing agencies in the world. Yeah,
you started building infomercial software, content for people to build those pieces?
That came a little bit later, but you know, my business partner at the time, he and his brother had made 5 feature-length science fiction movies by the time they graduated from college. And I was a geek, and we met, and I had a little music studio because I love music. Right. I'm a hack musician, I'll say. And I have friends who are engineers. Again, I modeled engineers all the time. And they said, okay, you know computer graphics, you know music stuff, you know this programming stuff. So we started working on screenplays with the idea to make movies. Wow. And over time, it just evolved into, like, again, I made a commitment to someone. An agency said, hey, can you do this? Yeah. And we started a company, and our idea was, let's make money selling products to marketing agencies. This is when Photoshop was brand new, digital video was brand new, and we were going to take the money and make movies. Well, of course, 9 years later, we finally made a feature film because we're too busy running a business, you know, and we sold it. Right. But, you know, again, it was a combination of this weird technology of video games and movies and entertainment and advertising, and we mixed it together. And again, we were brand new, but what we made that was useful we did a video game that shipped in 6 million boxes of cereal for General Mills. Wow. We made the first screensavers. This is before the web existed, so it was America Online and Delphi and CompuServe were the services. But I met people online, and I said, yeah, I can do that. And our little guys, we got together, came up with some cool ideas, made a demonstration, and pretty soon here are these 2 dorks from Minnesota in Hollywood hanging out at Sony, and we were like little rock stars.
That's very cool. Now, if you're watching, you may be thinking to yourself, okay, great. This guy's a genius. You know, he started from nothing. You know, I can't imagine what it'd be like to go from $16,000 a year trying to survive, you know, living in somebody's basement, to making millions of dollars and be able to do it from your home and have a lifestyle. But you might say, you know, how do I relate here to Mike? You know, Mike's very different than I am.